Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us, what city are you watching from? Moonlight Cafe at night was so quiet that only the sound of the ceiling fan turning could be heard. The round wall clock pointed to 10 o'clock. After a long day of serving customers, Emma's legs felt like they were about to detach from her body. She tossed the tablecloth into the water bucket and sighed in relief, knowing she could finally go home. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Emma answered, and the excited voice of Lucy, her longtime best friend, rang out. "Emma! Remember, you are expected to attend the wedding. I already sent the invitation. You should get it tomorrow." Emma chuckled, warmth in her chest despite her exhaustion. "Got it. Don't worry, I'll show up in my prettiest dress. I won't embarrass you." Satisfied, Lucy added a few more reminders before hanging up. Just as Emma slipped her phone back into her pocket, her eyes caught sight of a white envelope on the bar counter. On the cover, "To Emma." She smiled faintly. This must be the invitation Lucy mentioned. Perfect timing. Without opening it, she slid it straight into her handbag and locked up the cafe. The next morning, May sunlight streamed into Emma's small room. She stood before the mirror, holding up her pastel blue dress, the best she owned. She smoothed out the wrinkles, dabbed on a bit of pink lipstick, her heart fluttering with a mix of nerves and excitement. Lucy's wedding. I have to look my best, Emma told herself. Just before heading out, she remembered the envelope from last night. She pulled the card out and opened it quickly. Instead of reading the whole thing, her eyes skimmed straight to the bottom of the page for the venue, a five-star hotel in the city center. That was enough. Done. Let's go. Emma folded the card, tucked it back into her bag, and hurried to hail a cab. She didn't notice the bold words at the very top of the page. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Sophia and Daniel." The taxi stopped in front of a dazzling hotel. Emma lifted her head, awestruck by the glowing building. Luxury cars lined the entrance, and a red carpet stretched from the doors to the grand hall. "Lucy, you really kept this secret well." A wedding this extravagant? Emma thought, her nerves rising as she glanced down at her simple dress. As she stepped through the glass doors, it was like entering another world. Elegant ladies in glittering gowns, refined gentlemen in sharp black tuxedos, champagne glasses clinking, the scent of fresh flowers filling the air. Emma froze. Her eyes darted around, searching for Lucy. Nothing. Only strangers. Maybe she was still in the bridal suite. The music suddenly cut off. The MC raised the microphone, voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our bride and groom today, Sophia and Daniel." The hall erupted in applause. Emma went rigid. Her ears rang. Her heart stopped. Sophia, Daniel, not Lucy, not a single name she knew. Trembling, she dug into her bag and pulled out the card. This time, her eyes locked on the line at the top. The wedding of Sophia and Daniel. "Oh my God!" Emma gasped, clutching the card so tightly it crumpled in her hand. She had made a mistake. This wasn't Lucy's invitation at all. It was one meant for some other Emma. And she, foolish, careless, had prepared herself so carefully, only to walk straight into a wedding that had nothing to do with her. Heat rushed to her face. Emma shot up from her seat. She had to leave before anyone noticed, but a few nearby guests had already turned their heads, curious about the unfamiliar woman in the modest blue dress. She lowered her gaze and hurried toward the door. Just go before this gets worse. But at that exact moment, she felt it, a piercing gaze like a blade striking straight down her spine. Emma stopped, her heartbeat in chaos. At the far end of the banquet tables, beneath the crystal chandeliers, a tall man in a black tuxedo stood with a wine glass in hand. His eyes, dark and cold, were fixed on her. He raised his glass, drank slowly, the corner of his lips curling ever so slightly, like someone who already knew the secret she desperately wanted to hide. Emma bowed her head in fluster, quickening her steps, praying to escape that gaze. Yet inside, a sharp instinct told her, this man would not let her leave so easily. The banquet doors were right in front of her, but before she could reach them, that tall figure moved, striding directly toward her. As the music swelled once more, Emma felt her heartbeat shatter into pieces. A single small mistake, picking up the wrong envelope, had thrown her into the spiral of fate, opening the door to an encounter that would change her life forever. Emma drew a deep breath, her trembling hand reaching for the heavy glass door, desperate to escape the suffocating luxury pressing in around her. Only one thought raced through her mind. I have to disappear before anyone asks who I am. But before her fingers could touch the handle, a low voice sounded just behind her, authoritative without needing to be loud. Leaving so soon? Emma jolted, spinning around, and then her gaze collided with eyes as deep as an abyss. The man who had appeared stood tall and commanding in a black tuxedo, buttons fastened neatly, the collar of his crisp white shirt perfectly pressed. His broad forehead, straight nose, and strikingly handsome face made even the dazzling room fade into the background. But it was his eyes that froze Emma in place, cold, piercing, as if they could see straight into the tiny secrets she was desperate to hide. Alexander Cole. The name leapt into Emma's mind instantly. She had read about him in the papers. A young CEO, a business prodigy, known for his aloof, icy demeanor. A man the whole city spoke of with a mix of admiration and caution. I'm sorry, Emma stammered, trying to back away. I walked into the wrong place. I need to leave now. Alexander took a step forward, closing the distance until Emma had to tilt her head up to look at him. He leaned slightly closer, his firm hand suddenly wrapping around her wrist, holding it tight. His voice dropped low enough for only the two of them to hear. If you walk out now, you'll attract even more attention. Sit beside me. Emma froze in shock. Her eyes darted around the hall. Sure enough, a few curious glances had already started turning their way. In this glittering setting, her awkwardness only made her stand out more. What? What are you saying? I don't even know you, Emma whispered, struggling to free her hand. But his grip didn't loosen. Alexander arched an eyebrow, his lips curving slightly like someone accustomed to controlling every situation. You don't need to know me. Just sit next to me. That way, no one will pay you any more mind. Emma was speechless. Logic screamed at her to run, to escape this place as fast as possible. But her heartbeat pounded wildly, threatening to burst out of her chest. He tugged lightly, and before Emma could react, she found herself being led toward the banquet table at the front, where only a few seats remained, right at the center, beside the most important guest of all. Emma sat down, her hands still trembling. The wine glass before her shimmered under the crystal lights, but she dared not touch it. Meanwhile, Alexander sat right beside her, composed as if this had all been planned. Why are you doing this? Emma leaned toward him, whispering, her eyes flicking nervously around. Because if you stand awkwardly alone, you'll become the subject of gossip. But if you sit next to me, Alexander paused, his eyes locking firmly on hers, you'll be seen as an honored guest. Emma swallowed hard, her whole body burning, her mind tangled like knotted threads. Who was she really? Just the owner of a small cafe. What right did she have to sit beside Alexander Cole, the most powerful CEO in the city? She wanted to argue, but the looks surrounding them, half admiring, half envious, kept her frozen in place. All she could do was bite her lip, forcing herself to sit still, while her heart raced so hard she feared he could hear it. The music swelled again, and the MC resumed recounting the love story of the bride and groom. But Emma didn't hear a word. All that echoed in her ears was the low, steady voice of the man beside her. What's your name? Alexander asked, as though they were in a private meeting rather than a brightly lit wedding hall. Emma, she replied, head bowed. Emma, he repeated, tasting the name as if testing its weight. Short, easy to remember. Emma pressed her lips together, not knowing what to say next. Why did he even care? She dared glance up for a brief second, and instantly regretted it. Alexander's gaze cut into her like a sharp blade, cold and assessing, yet glinting with something else. Curiosity, perhaps even intrigue. Emma lowered her head again, praying the ceremony would end soon so she could escape. Yet with every passing moment, she felt Alexander's presence beside her more acutely. Every movement of his, the lift of a glass, the setting it down, The slight lean of his shoulders made her unbearably tense. "You don't have to do this," Emma finally whispered, taking the risk. "I'm not your girlfriend. I have nothing to do with you. If anyone finds out—" Alexander tilted his head, a lock of dark hair falling slightly forward, his deep eyes drilling into hers. "Do you really think anyone would dare say a word, seeing you sit next to me?" Emma was struck silent. There was no arrogance in his tone. It was a simple fact. Everyone in the hall knew the immense power this cold CEO commanded. No one would dare interfere. Fireworks lit up the ceiling as the bride and groom made their radiant entrance. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Emma clapped along half-heartedly, trying to blend in, but her mind refused to focus. Meanwhile, Alexander remained silent, his gaze never once lifting to the stage. Instead, his eyes shifted slightly toward her, the stranger who had stumbled into his orbit. Emma felt it, unmistakably, and his silence only made her heartbeat race faster. As the banquet began, guests broke into lively groups, chatting and laughing. Emma sat frozen, hands clenched tightly in her lap, wondering how she could possibly slip away without drawing attention. At that moment, Alexander leaned closer. His breath brushed her skin, making her flinch. "If you truly want to leave, wait until everyone's focused on the newlyweds. I'll take you out." Emma lifted her head, startled. In his eyes, a mischievous spark flickered, like he was testing her reaction. She bit her lip. Half of her wanted to flee. The other half was already being pulled in by this dangerous man. Festive music filled the grand hall, the wedding reception glittering like a performance of light and luxury. Yet the spotlight of countless eyes wasn't only fixed on the radiant couple on stage. A different rumor had already begun to spread at lightning speed. "Did you see that? Alexander Cole looks like he came with a woman." "Really? I thought he never brought a date to public events like this. The girl in the blue dress. I had never seen her in high society before. She looks so nervous." Emma caught fragments of the whispers, her heart pounding furiously. She gripped the hem of her dress tightly against her lap to hide her trembling. One careless mistake, picking up the wrong wedding invitation, and now she was the subject of gossip in a hall full of the city's most powerful people. Beside her, Alexander Cole remained as composed as ever, as if nothing were happening. He sat with his back straight, eyes coolly scanning the room, occasionally sipping his red wine. His calmness only made Emma feel more unsettled. "Do you hear them?" Emma leaned closer, whispering. "People think I'm your girlfriend." Alexander glanced sideways, his eyes as indifferent as winter wind. "Yes." "Yes? What do you mean, yes? Don't you think this is a problem?" Emma's breathing quickened, her lips stretching into a forced smile whenever someone glanced their way. "A problem for you, not for me," he replied flatly. Emma's eyes widened. How could this man be so nonchalant? Camera flashes flickered from reporters scattered around the banquet. Emma flinched, cold sweat breaking out across her back. She had never been photographed in front of such a crowd before. "Oh God, they're taking pictures," she whispered. Alexander set down his glass, his tone steady as ever. "Let them. The more you look afraid, the more attention you'll draw." Emma turned to him, snapping under her breath. "Easy for you to say. I'm not used to this." He raised an eyebrow, the faintest curve of amusement tugging at his lips. "Maybe you should get used to it." Emma fell silent. In that moment, she realized, ever since she had stepped into the hall, it was Alexander who kept her from being exposed as an intruder. Yet it was also because of him that she was now mistaken for the CEO's mysterious girlfriend. From across the hall in a velvet armchair, Evelyn Cole, Alexander's grandmother, sat quietly observing. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her sharp eyes gleaming with wisdom behind round glasses. She didn't join the boisterous chatter of the other guests. Instead, she watched her grandson and the unfamiliar young woman at his side. She had seen Alexander appear with many women before. Flawless, powerful women whose eyes sparkled only with calculation. They laughed too loudly, spoke too much, and were always desperate to capture his attention. Alexander remained cold, distant, never truly caring. But tonight, she noticed something different. The girl in the blue dress wasn't trying to impress anyone. On the contrary, she sat nervously, clutching her skirt, her eyes betraying raw tension. In that awkwardness, Evelyn saw something rare: sincerity, innocence. No schemes, no masks. How strange, she murmured with a faint smile. The one who can keep him seated all evening is a girl who doesn't belong to this world at all. Emma, meanwhile, wanted nothing more than to crawl under the table. The whispers only grew louder. She kept her head down, hardly daring to meet anyone's eyes. "Could you move your hand away?" she whispered, realizing Alexander still had his hand resting close to her shoulder on the chair. He tilted his head, lowering his voice. "Don't worry. I'm only making sure people believe you're really here with me." Emma turned toward him, meeting those unfathomable dark eyes. Her heartbeat stumbled. "Do you honestly not find this troublesome?" Alexander took a slow sip of wine and answered simply, "No." Just one word, but it threw Emma into disarray. She didn't know whether to feel angry or strangely relieved. By the time the newlyweds stepped down from the stage to greet guests, the whispers had already hardened into conviction. She really is Alexander's girlfriend. She looks different, not like the usual high society debutantes. Maybe this time it's real? Emma wanted to sink through the floor, yet Alexander sat still, serene, as if none of it mattered. The banquet continued, lights glittering across the hall. Emma sat beside him, doing her best to hide her growing confusion. She knew that the moment she stood up, every eye would turn to her again. From afar, Evelyn Cole kept watching, the corner of her lips curving into a discreet smile. In her experienced gaze, Emma had already left a unique impression, a fresh breeze amid the shallow world surrounding her grandson. Emma had no idea that from this moment on, she was officially the CEO's mysterious girl in everyone's eyes. And the spiral of fate had only just begun. The music shifted. The graceful melody of a waltz drifted through the hall, softening the festive atmosphere into something more elegant and alluring. Beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers, couples began rising one by one, stepping onto the wide dance floor in the center of the grand hall. Emma sat frozen in her seat, her hands clasped tightly together. She wished she could vanish, dissolve quietly into the crowd. But at that very moment, Alexander suddenly rose to his feet. He turned toward her, his deep gaze leaving no room for refusal. "Come with me," he said, his voice low, yet carrying enough weight to send her heart into a frantic rhythm. Emma's eyes widened. "What? I don't know how to dance." Alexander leaned down slightly, extending his strong hand toward her. A faint smile touched the corner of his lips. "You don't need to know. Just follow my lead." Emma hesitated, her eyes darting around, caught in the swirl of countless stares. Dozens of eyes were fixed on them. If she refused, she would only draw more attention to herself. Her heart hammered as she nervously placed her small hand into his. Alexander guided Emma onto the dance floor. The lights reflected off her pastel blue dress, softening its color against the sea of dazzling gowns around her. He placed one hand on her waist, lifting her other hand in his. Emma stiffened, heat rushing to her cheeks. The closeness made her acutely aware of every breath he took. "Relax," Alexander murmured, his eyes locked on hers. Emma forced herself to take a deep breath. On the first step to the music, she nearly stepped on his polished shoe. She gasped, "I'm sorry. I told you, I don't know how." Alexander let out a quiet chuckle, a rare smile that softened his usually cold face into something disarmingly warm. "It's fine. I'll lead you." And he truly did. Though she faltered, he guided her with ease, carrying her along with the rhythm until her clumsy steps began to flow more smoothly. Emma couldn't help but be astonished. Around them, couples spun gracefully beneath the lights, the chandeliers scattering a magical glow across the room. Emma looked up and found Alexander's gaze fixed on her. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to stop. She realized then that her heart was no longer pounding from fear, but from something else, something vague, indescribable. His touch was both firm and gentle, his eyes both cold and carrying an undercurrent she couldn't name. Why are you doing this?" she whispered as the dance carried them toward the center of the floor. "Doing what?" Alexander's voice was calm. Bringing me out here, letting people misunderstand. He tilted his head, lowering his voice against her ear. And what's wrong with letting them think that? Emma fell silent. His words struck her chest like a spark, leaving her even more shaken. As the music neared its end, Evelyn Cole slowly stepped onto the dance floor, cane in hand. The crowd instinctively parted to give her way. Her face brightened with a rare smile, her eyes glittering with playful mischief. Alexander, her voice rang clear enough for many to hear. So you finally brought your girlfriend to meet me. Emma went rigid, her face burning as though drenched in scalding water. She shook her head frantically. No, I'm not. But Alexander said nothing. Instead, he tightened his grip on her hand, keeping her close. His eyes were calm, his lips curved faintly, an unspoken admission. The hall buzzed with new whispers. Did you hear that? Even Evelyn Cole acknowledged her. Then it's settled. This isn't just a rumor. Emma wanted to escape, but there was no way out. For the first time in her life, she felt herself pulled into a whirlwind completely beyond her control. When the music ended, Alexander bowed slightly and escorted Emma off the dance floor. She was still reeling from the shock of what had just happened. Only one question echoed in her mind. Why didn't he deny it? Meanwhile, Alexander's expression remained as composed as ever, as though nothing unusual had occurred. Yet in the depths of his eyes flickered a strange light, like a man who had just begun a game he found intriguing. Emma didn't know it yet, but his silence would open the door to a storm of chaos she could never have foreseen. The music gradually faded, and guests began leaving their tables. The luxurious atmosphere that had dazzled the hall moments before only left Emma feeling more suffocated. The curious stares, the whispers of the CEO's mysterious girlfriend, still echoed in her ears, making her feel as though she had just played the lead role in some cruel joke. The moment she had a chance, Emma stood quickly. Her trembling hand set the glass down, the chair creaking softly behind her. Alexander tilted his head slightly. Where are you going? Home. I've stayed far too long already, Emma answered curtly, avoiding his gaze. She gave a polite nod, then hurried toward the door, her blue dress swaying beneath the chandelier light. She didn't look back. She didn't say another word. Outside the hotel lobby, the night air was cool. Emma rushed past the marble columns, desperate to get away. With each step, shame twisted deeper inside her. Oh God, Emma, what have you done? She muttered under her breath. All because of a mistaken invitation, she had turned into a laughingstock. Sitting beside a man like Alexander Cole, being mistaken for his girlfriend, having reporters take her photo, it all felt like a nightmare. She swore to herself she would never again set foot in that world. While Emma fled in haste, Alexander remained seated, like a statue inside the grand hall. He showed no expression, but his dark eyes lingered on the fading silhouette of the blue dress that had disappeared through the doors. Beside him, Evelyn Cole approached with her cane and eased into the empty chair. She had been watching all along, Emma's awkward fumbling, every furrow of her brow, every trembling glance. She's gone, Evelyn said, her voice low but warm. Alexander didn't respond right away. He slowly swirled the wine in his glass, eyes fixed on the empty space where Emma had vanished. Evelyn tilted her head, her wise eyes glinting. You know, it's been years since I've seen you smile like you did tonight. Alexander stiffened slightly. He looked up, frowning. I didn't smile. Yes, you did, Evelyn said firmly. When that girl fumbled, unsure of what to do, you smiled. Not the polite kind, not the forced kind you use for business. A real smile. Alexander stayed silent. The wine in his glass caught the light, casting ripples of red across his calm face. Don't let go of the one who can make you smile like that, Evelyn said, her tone slow but resolute. I've seen enough women approach you for money and power. But that girl, she's different. Alexander met her gaze, the depths of his eyes flickering. That night, long after the guests had left, Alexander stood alone before the vast glass windows of the hotel. The city glittered below, but in his mind, there was only the image of a girl in a simple blue dress, nervous eyes, hands clutching at her skirt. He recalled how Emma had tried to hide her tension, yet radiated a sincerity unlike any woman he had ever met. No scheming, no pretense, just herself. He didn't know why, but a strange feeling stirred within him, as though her presence had left a void the moment she was gone. "Emma," he murmured under his breath, lips curving faintly. Morning at Coal Industries. In his top-floor office, Alexander sat before a stack of contracts, but his eyes refused to focus. The words blurred, Evelyn's voice echoing in his mind. "Don't let go of the one who makes you truly smile." A quiet chuckle escaped him. Since when had he cared this much about a stranger? A knock sounded at the door. His assistant, Lucas, stepped in. "Mr. Cole, about last night's party. The press has already published articles. They're calling the woman with you the mysterious girlfriend." Alexander's eyes fell on the newspaper Lucas placed on his desk. A photo of Emma in her blue dress stared back at him, sitting beside him, her expression uneasy. Something tightened in his chest. "Find out about her," Alexander said sharply. Lucas blinked, surprised. "You mean, Emma, I want to know who she is." Alexander's gaze turned back to the window, cold as ever, though a trace of something softer glimmered beneath. Meanwhile, at Moonlight Cafe, Emma busied herself rearranging tables and chairs. She forced herself to forget everything that had happened. "It was just a mistake," she muttered. "A stupid mistake. I got out of it, and that's enough." But deep down, she couldn't erase the memory of Alexander Cole's dark, piercing eyes. Every time it surfaced, her heart stumbled into confusion. She shook her head, determined to focus on work. But she had no idea that from that very moment, her fate was already intertwined with the man she had always thought was beyond her reach. Morning sunlight poured over the bustling city streets, yet the little neighborhood where Moonlight Cafe sat had its own slower rhythm. The scent of freshly brewed coffee blended with the aroma of warm pastries drifting from the glass windows, drawing in passers-by to stop for a taste. Behind the counter, Emma stood with her hair tied neatly back, her hands swiftly frothing milk for a cappuccino. After the chaos of the wedding night, all she wanted was to bury everything in the familiar routines of her cafe. "Last night was nothing but a nightmare. I'm a cafe owner, that's all. That glittering world has nothing to do with me," Emma told herself, pouring all her focus into work. The bell over the door jingled, signaling the arrival of a new customer. Emma lifted her head with her usual warm smile, only for it to freeze instantly when her eyes landed on the tall, imposing figure, whose presence made her heart stumble. Alexander Cole. He stood in the doorway, tall and composed in a simple yet expensive suit. His eyes swept calmly around the cafe before resting on Emma. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a faint, almost teasing smile. "What a coincidence!" His deep voice rolled evenly through the small space. Emma nearly dropped the glass in her hand. She turned away quickly, trying to mask her fluster. "Sorry, but my cafe doesn't serve practical jokes," she replied briskly, busying herself with her work. But Alexander had already approached the counter, moving with the ease of someone who belonged. His gaze traveled leisurely over the wooden shelves of roasted beans, the small frame pictures Emma had hung on the wall. "Nice place," he said at last, then suddenly looked directly at her. "Just like its owner." Emma froze. Her heart skipped, but she recovered quickly, retorting, "Thanks, but I'm afraid customers come here for coffee, not cheap flattery." The corner of Alexander's mouth curved, his eyes glinting with interest. Rarely did anyone dare answer him so directly. "Seems like you don't like compliments?" Emma folded her arms, tilting her head with cool defiance. "I only like compliments when they come with a generous tip. Otherwise, meaningless." A few customers nearby chuckled, clearly entertained by their banter. Emma flushed slightly but kept her chin high, unwilling to let him have the upper hand. Alexander chuckled softly and slid into a stool by the counter. "Then give me a menu. I'll prove my compliments aren't cheap." Emma set the menu down firmly, keeping her voice steady. "Let's hope you order coffee, not the cafe owner." Alexander raised an eyebrow, his gaze locking onto hers with unsettling intensity. "Not ruling that out." Emma choked on her words but quickly turned away, pretending to fuss with the espresso machine. God, why am I letting him get under my skin like this? When the drink was ready, Emma set the espresso down before him. Black coffee, no sugar, suits someone as cold as you, she teased. Alexander lifted the cup, took a slow sip, and kept his eyes fixed on her. Bitter, but honest. Emma rolled her eyes, caught between irritation and reluctant amusement. Since when had she become the target of the CEO's half-serious, half-playful philosophy? Drink up and pay at the counter. I've got plenty of work to do, she cut in sharply. But Alexander didn't seem to hear. Leaning one arm on the counter, he tilted closer, his voice dropping low. Emma, I've been thinking about you since last night. Emma's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. The words were loud enough to rattle her, but low enough that no one else could hear. You, she stammered, then quickly composed herself. If you're trying to tease me, you picked the wrong person. Alexander only smiled, his gaze steady and unreadable. The cafe grew busier with each passing minute, but between Emma and Alexander, it was as though they occupied their own tense little world. Wiping down a table, Emma shot him a side glance. Mr. CEO, I thought you only liked luxury venues. Didn't expect you'd have time for a small cafe like this. Alexander didn't hesitate. I'm interested in things that stand out, especially when the cafe comes with such an interesting owner. Emma pressed her lips together. She didn't know whether to feel proud or annoyed. One thought ran through her head. This man really is my nemesis. When Alexander finally stood to leave, he placed a bill on the counter, 3 times the price of his coffee. Just before walking out, he turned back with a faint smile. The coffee was good, and my compliments aren't as cheap as you think. The door closed behind him, the bell chiming softly, leaving Emma standing stiff behind the counter, equal parts irritated and flustered. Her heart pounded, uncertain whether it was from anger or from something far more dangerous beginning to stir. She shook her head firmly, muttering to herself, talk about a fated nuisance. Loving this story? This story belongs to Soul Stories. If you see it anywhere else, please come back to our official channel to enjoy it in full. The little bell above the glass door of Moonlight Cafe had been chiming with suspicious frequency lately. Emma was used to her regular customers, nearby office workers, young couples, and elderly patrons who adored the rich aroma of roasted beans. But there was one particular guest who showed up regularly, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, and occasionally even late at night. Alexander Cole. Each time he walked in, the air seemed to shift, weighed down by his commanding aura. A tailored suit, a steady stride, cold eyes. Yet the moment his gaze fell on Emma, his lips curved into that faint smile, like a challenge only she was meant to face. Black coffee, no sugar, Emma said, setting the cup down on the counter. Perfect for someone as cold as you. Alexander lifted the cup, took a sip, and replied evenly, just like you. Sweet on the outside, but more bitter than I expected. Emma sputtered, eyes wide. Excuse me, this is a cafe, not a place for cheap word games. He shrugged, his lips tugging upward. That wasn't wordplay. I was just telling the truth. Emma spun around, both annoyed and amused. Clearly, every time Alexander showed up, her little cafe turned into a sparring ground. Customers nearby discreetly watched, enjoying it like a free performance. Emma was used to speaking her mind. Sharp, straightforward, never hesitant. Her quick comebacks never gave Alexander the chance to dominate. But it was exactly that spirit that drew him closer. In Alexander's world, most people were cautious, calculating, desperate to please him. Emma was different. She didn't care about the Cole name, didn't show fear, didn't flatter. In fact, she often teased him, something almost no one dared to do. And Alexander realized that every time he left the cafe, he carried an odd feeling with him, as though he had just left a battlefield. But instead of exhaustion, he felt invigorated. One afternoon, sunlight streamed through the cafe windows as the bell chimed again. But this time, it wasn't Alexander. An elegant silver-haired woman entered, dressed simply, leaning on a polished wooden cane. Her eyes gleamed with wisdom, her expression calm and serene. Emma recognized her instantly, the woman who had sat near Alexander at the wedding banquet, the one everyone had shown such respect to. Emma's heart skipped. Oh God, his grandmother. Good afternoon, Emma said, steadying her nerves. May I get you something, ma'am? Evelyn Cole smiled warmly. A cup of hot tea, please, and perhaps a pastry if you have one. Emma nodded quickly and set about preparing the order. When she placed the tea before her, Evelyn nodded. This cafe is lovely. Warm, simple, unlike the places I usually visit. I'm glad you like it, Emma replied, sitting across from her shyly. I opened this place myself, decorated every little corner with my own hands. Evelyn studied the young woman in front of her. Gone was the evening gown and the glittering lights of the wedding. Emma now wore a plain apron, her hair tied neatly, but her smile glowed and her eyes sparkled. You really are different, Evelyn said slowly. Not like the women around Alexander I've met before. Emma froze, her cheeks heating. You know me? Evelyn chuckled softly. I noticed you at the wedding. The way you fumbled, your honesty. It made you endearing. Emma bit her lip and lowered her head. She had expected disdain. Instead, at that moment, the bell chimed again. Emma looked up and nearly groaned. Alexander. He hesitated slightly when he saw his grandmother sitting with Emma. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes before he walked over and bowed his head. Grandmother. Evelyn smiled and gestured for him to sit. I was just chatting with Emma. She's far more intelligent and delightful than I expected. Alexander's gaze shifted to Emma. She turned away at once, pretending to polish a glass, though the tips of her ears flushed red. Evelyn continued, her tone calm but firm. Alexander, you're always surrounded by insincere people. It's time you understand. Sincerity is the most precious thing of all. Emma wanted to protest, but she couldn't. Evelyn's words carried a weight that stirred something warm and unsettling in her chest. Alexander said nothing, only stared at the young woman before him. But in his deep eyes, something had begun to change. When Evelyn rose to leave, she reached for Emma's hand, squeezing it gently. I truly hope to see you again, dear. Emma bowed her head, her heart pounding wildly. Once they were alone, Alexander sat in silence for a moment before speaking softly. Looks like you've won the approval of the toughest critic in my family. Emma's eyes widened and she snapped back quickly. And you've exhausted every bit of my patience. Alexander laughed, a rare, unguarded sound that left Emma flustered despite herself. Moonlight Cafe was bustling today. Small tables brimmed with laughter, the scent of hot coffee mingling with the sweetness of fresh pastries. Emma was so busy she barely had time to think about the special customer who had been showing up far too often. Until the familiar chime of the doorbell rang. Alexander Cole. He walked in with the same calm composure, as if this place had become part of his daily routine. Emma frowned and sighed, truly a fated nuisance. Again, she muttered, then said louder, What do you want this time, mister? Cole? Alexander strolled to the counter, resting his elbow on the polished wood, his eyes deep but his lips curving faintly. Not just coffee. I came to extend an invitation. Emma froze. An invitation? There's a charity gala this weekend. I want you to come with me. Emma nearly dropped the cup in her hand. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Sorry? You want me to go with you? You must be joking. Alexander remained calm. I never joke about this sort of thing. Emma let out a bitter laugh. You've got the wrong person. I'm just a cafe owner. I don't belong at events like that. People would laugh at me. Leave that to me, Alexander replied firmly, his eyes gleaming with determination that brooked no refusal. Emma shook her head, resolute. No, I don't want to repeat that mistake again. That night was more than enough. Memories of her humiliation at the wedding hall rushed back. She bit her lip, turning away, silently reminding herself to keep her distance. Later that afternoon, after Alexander had gone, Emma was surprised to see Evelyn appear at the cafe door. Elegant as ever, her silver hair neatly tied, her eyes kind. Emma, how are you, dear? Evelyn smiled, settling into her usual seat. Emma hurried to bring her tea, but her expression was uncertain. Evelyn tilted her head knowingly. Alexander invited you to the charity gala, didn't he? Emma's eyes widened. You already knew? Did you think he could hide something like that from me? Evelyn chuckled. Emma lowered her head, her voice small. But I don't belong there, ma'am. I'm not part of that world. People will look at me differently. Evelyn set her hand gently on the table, her voice warm and steady. My dear, don't be afraid of being different. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes you precious. People may talk, but only you decide who you are. Emma looked up, meeting those kind eyes. Evelyn's words sank deep into her heart, washing away the shame she still carried. That weekend, Emma stood before her mirror, hesitant in a simple ivory dress she hadn't worn in years. She had never imagined herself attending a gala with Alexander Cole. Don't be afraid of being different, my dear. Evelyn's voice echoed in her mind. Emma drew a deep breath and told herself, just this once. Then I'll go back to my ordinary life. A sleek black car pulled up outside the cafe. Alexander stepped out, adjusting his tie. His gaze caught on Emma, and for a brief moment he faltered. You? He paused, lips curving faintly. Could he look better suited for this than you think? Emma blushed, flustered as she climbed into the car. Don't say things like that. I'm not used to it. Then get used to it, Alexander replied, half serious, half teasing. The gala hall glittered with lights. Auction paintings hung along the walls, and tables displayed lavish items donated to the charity fund. Emma stepped inside, her heart pounding. Once again, every eye turned toward Alexander and the woman at his side. But this time, Emma didn't feel as lost as she had at the wedding. Beside her, Alexander walked with steady confidence, his hand resting lightly on her back, a quiet reassurance. Don't worry. Just think of it as an art exhibition, he murmured. Emma nodded, willing herself to stay calm. When the program began, she watched Alexander step onto the stage. His voice was warm, so different from his usual coldness. We are here not only to donate money, but to share hope. Every dollar we raise tonight will become meals, books, and opportunities for children. Applause thundered. Emma stared at him in awe, seeing him in a new light. Throughout the evening, Alexander not only pledged a generous donation, but also walked down among the children invited as guests. He crouched to listen to them, a rare smile softening his face. Emma held her breath. The cold, untouchable man she thought cared only for money and power now radiated a warmth that shook her heart. As the night drew to a close, Emma stood quietly in a corner. Golden light fell across Alexander's face as he bent to clasp a tiny bracelet onto a little girl's wrist. The tenderness of the gesture left Emma spellbound. When he turned back, his eyes caught hers. For a moment, amid the crowded hall, there was only the two of them. He walked toward her, stopping just a step away. See? His voice was low, warm. I'm not only cold. Emma bit her lip, her pulse racing. She didn't answer, but deep inside she knew. Tonight she had seen another side of Alexander, a side that had cracked the defenses she had built around her heart. On the ride home, Emma sat silently, watching the city lights blur past. Alexander drove, his face calm, but his eyes glimmered faintly with satisfaction when they flicked to her in the rearview mirror. Emma turned away, pressing her hand against her chest. Her heart was still pounding. One unexpected invitation had pulled her back into his world once more. But this time, instead of feeling out of place, Emma realized she had glimpsed a truth about Alexander Cole, one that was both genuine and disarmingly warm. That May morning, sunlight fell gently across Moonlight's glass window. The scent of freshly roasted coffee lingered in the air like a familiar greeting. Emma flipped the open sign toward the street and drew a deep breath, trying to shake off the exhaustion left by days of relentless gossip. Today will be fine. Make the first cappuccino pretty, draw a heart a little crooked like always. It'll be fine. But as soon as she lifted her head, the smile froze on her lips. On the newspaper stand by the door, the headlines screamed at her in bold black letters. The mysterious girlfriend of CEO Alexander Cole revealed, a small cafe owner in the city center. Below it was a photo from the weekend gala. Alexander in his black tuxedo, leaning toward Emma, her in a simple ivory dress, wide-eyed, caught in the very moment her heart had faltered. The camera had captured it perfectly, sealing it as an undeniable truth. No, that's not. Emma's voice slipped out in a thread-thin whisper. She flipped the page, the paper crackling under fingers calloused from steam and hot milk. Inside, experts speculated. Friends of friends gossiped. Theories ballooned like soap bubbles. Cinderella and her prince, an ordinary girl about to leave her cafe to become a socialite. One section even quoted an insider claiming Alexander was serious about her. Emma snapped the paper shut. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it wanted to escape. She turned back to the counter, forcing herself into the rhythm she knew. Grind, tamp, pull the shot, steam milk. The machine hissed steadily. Milk frothed into a cloud-like foam. Please let everything return to normal. The bell chimed. Then again, and again, until the distinct rings blurred into one continuous metallic jangle. 10 minutes later, every seat was filled. 20 minutes, the line snaked out the door. 30 minutes, Emma realized many eyes weren't here for coffee at all. Phones were raised, cameras aimed directly at her, half smirks on faces, teasing questions buzzing like mosquitoes. Do you serve the CEO's girlfriend here? How much for the future Mrs. Cole's cappuccino? Miss, does Mr. Cole prefer black or with milk? Come on, tell us. Just one photo. Look here, please. Emma pressed her lips together. Please, everyone, line up properly. This is a cafe, she said firmly, placing a latte cup on its saucer as carefully as she could. But her words were drowned in the crowd. A young woman shoved a phone in her face, flash exploding across her eyes. A middle-aged man joked loudly if Moonlight was changing its name to Coal Light. Someone spilled a glass of ice, the crash making Emma flinch. Please don't film the staff, Emma raised her voice. If you need a photo, take one of the coffee, not the people. But you're the story, a girl laughed into her live stream. Guys, I'm at Moonlight, the cafe of the CEO's girlfriend. I swear she looks prettier than in the papers. The room erupted with laughter. Hands clapped, someone whistled. A group of school kids in uniform pushed forward yelling, "Say you love Mr. Cole," while raising their phones higher. Emma's face burned hot, but her hands kept pouring milk. The latte heart came out crooked, more crooked than usual. She set the cup down, lips dry as salt. A middle-aged woman elbowed her way to the counter, voice low and sugary. Sweetheart, I'm a journalist. Could you please provide one comment, just to confirm? I'll protect you from the other outlets. Sorry, I have no comment. Emma's reply was mechanical as she squeezed past to fetch clean cups. Please respect boundaries. Boundaries? The woman sneered. You went public with him, you attended his event, and now you want boundaries? Impossible. The words hit like a silent slap. Emma gripped the edge of the counter, her nails leaving white marks in the wood. Outside, long-lens cameras rose and fell like cannons aimed at her tiny cafe. Each time the door opened, another flash exploded, spraying cold light across her face. Moonlight, the place she once belonged, where she knew which chair creaked, which regulars liked sugar, had turned into an arena where strangers poured out their curiosity like a fire hydrant. Amid the chaos, Emma realized her breaths were shortening. She barely heard the machine anymore, only her own heartbeat drumming in her ears. A spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor with a sharp clang. Heads turned instantly. A girl zoomed her camera closer, whispering, "She's shaking. Did you see that?" Enough! Emma's voice cracked as she slammed a small sign on the counter. No filming. Her lips trembled as she forced a smile. Everyone, please, line up properly. This is a cafe, not a film set. Some customers bowed apologetically. A young man gently tugged his girlfriend out of the way, and others tried to form a line again. But the tide pressed on. Vloggers called out. Tiny microphones flashed. A seasoned cameraman set up a tripod right on the sidewalk, with the lens poking through the door. The order bell rang non-stop. By midday, one of her regulars, Leonard, who always ordered a weak Americano, stood and blocked a group trying to cut the line. "Respect the girl," he barked. "She sells coffee, not her private life." But her privacy had already been compromised the moment that headline hit. Emma drew a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. Emma pulled the shutter down 2 hours early, despite the long line outside. She apologized breathlessly, drowning under complaints. Closing already? So unprofessional. Putting on a show! Someone tried to yank the shutter up. A microphone jabbed through the gap. Are you afraid of being exposed as a fake? Metal groaned as she locked it shut. Noise cut off instantly, like a lid slamming on a pot of boiling water. Inside, the cafe was darker, quieter. Emma sank to the floor, back against the door, knees pulled to her chest. She didn't cry, not yet. She only breathed, long and shaky, trying to stretch her lungs against the knot in her chest. From the counter, her little radio played an old jazz tune she usually loved while cleaning tables. Today it sounded distant, as if through 3 walls of glass. Her phone buzzed, unknown numbers, tagged posts, a message from an old friend. So, are you rich yet? Emma flipped it face down with a weary sigh. Since the day she picked up the wrong wedding invitation, her life had spun off its axis, and she was clinging to her cafe like a raft in a storm. Knocks on the door. 3, steady, unhurried. Emma's head shot up. She rose, brushed off her knees, and cracked the shutter just enough to see a pair of familiar dark eyes outside, deep as night. Emma. His voice slipped through the gap, low and warm. Let me in. She hesitated. Every defense in her body rose at once. You shouldn't be here. Why? His tone was calm. Because they're all out there. And because, Emma swallowed hard, because my cafe can't take this anymore. Alexander's lips didn't move. He didn't glance at the lenses on the sidewalk, didn't look at the phones held high. He looked straight at Emma, at the exhaustion in her eyes. Let me in. She shook her head. We should stop here. Silence. Then Alexander's voice dropped like a stone to the bottom of a well, striking exactly where it hurt most. You think I'll let the media decide for us? Emma gripped the door. You can't control them. I know, he admitted plainly, but I can control myself, and I choose never to leave you standing alone in front of them. You make it sound easy, she laughed bitterly, but I'm the one in the storm. They dig into my past, call me a lucky Cinderella, and say I'm not good enough. They crowd my cafe just to snap my face. Then let me in, Alexander said, his tone softening. We'll talk inside. Emma hesitated, then opened the door wide enough for him to slip through. The shutter clanged shut, locking out the rain-scented city. Inside was only the golden light, the radio's faint jazz, and the space between them. Alexander hung his coat on the familiar hook, his presence settling into the little cafe almost naturally. His hand brushed the worn wooden counter. Table 3 creaks. The chair by the door wobbles. The left grinder needs a new blade. You've been here enough to memorize all that, Emma muttered, tired but still prickly. In the place you belong, he said without smiling. I want to belong too. You belong in boardrooms. Emma turned away, hand on the cooled steel milk jug. This is my small world. If I have to protect it by leaving you, I will. Who are you punishing? Alexander asked quietly. Me or yourself? Her lips trembled. She had held her tears all day with sheer willpower, but that question cracked her armor like caramel struck by a spoon. You don't understand, she whispered. It started with a wrong invitation. I walked into the wrong hall, sat next to you, got mistaken for your girlfriend, and everything spun out of control. I was never part of your world. She lifted her gaze, eyes shining under the yellow light. I'm just a clumsy barista who draws crooked hearts. I know how to wipe tables, fix squeaky chairs, and remember regular orders. I don't know how to breathe when 10 cameras point at my face. I don't know how to answer when people ask what a CEO tips. Alexander stepped closer. Look at me. She did, as if an invisible string lifted her chin. You're right, he nodded slowly. You were mistaken. But that mistake brought you to me. The words landed soft as feathers, yet stung sweet everywhere they touched. Emma opened her mouth, closed it, opened again, like relearning the word trust. Don't say things that pretty. Her voice was hoarse. I'm afraid it'll only hurt later. Then let me change what hurt means. His eyes never left hers. If it's pain from the cameras, I'll block it. Pain from hiding, I'll speak. Pain from fear of losing, I'll stay. You protect the cafe by leaving me. I protect you by standing next to you. Choose, Emma, hide alone or walk with me. She laughed through her tears. You always sound like you're on stage. Because I've stood on stage too long, he said, and I forgot my happiness was in the front row. The front row? Emma frowned. That chair by the door, Alexander pointed, where you make my espresso every morning and finally glance up at me for 1 second. Where you place a small bouquet, not roses but cheap yellow daisies. Where the radio plays old jazz. A world that's just one step away. Emma bit her lip. I'm still scared. Scared one day I won't survive the weight of your name, Cole. Then let me make it lighter. He lifted a hand, hesitated, asking permission with his eyes. When she nodded, he touched her cheek gently. So when they hear Cole, they think of moonlight. A crooked latte heart so beautiful it's unforgettable. A tear slipped beneath his fingertip. Emma closed her eyes, breathing out. Outside, the rain softened to a steady rhythm. I don't need you to save me, she murmured. I'm not saving, he shook his head. I'm choosing. They stood still, the world reduced to warm, yellow light, rain-tapped glass, and the faint hum of the coffee machine. Emma realized she was no longer resisting. Letting go of resistance felt like exhaling after holding her breath too long. So what will you do with the storm out there, she asked. What I must. Alexander's tone was firm. Send legal letters to the papers. Demand platforms remove invasive clips. Brief PR to set boundaries, not stories. And if anyone pushes harder, I'll step forward first. You open at 7:30 like always. Sell coffee, not yourself. Emma laughed for the first time that day, light as clinking glass. Did you rehearse that in the elevator? No, he shrugged, a faint, rare smile tugging his lips. I wrote it in my head the day you called me a bothersome customer. I still think that, she teased, mock glaring. You're really annoying. Talk too much. I can be quiet, he said, if you let me do one thing. What thing? Stay. His voice lowered, unguarded. Stay. With you. The air thinned. Emma heard her own heartbeat, like a piano key struck just right. She drew a tissue, dabbed her tears, the motion calm, like straightening a tablecloth or lowering the radio for conversation. You can stay, she said, nodding, but... Her eyes glimmered mischievously. You pay double for being a nuisance. Alexander laughed, really this time. Triple. Deal. Emma smiled, then faltered, softer now. Alexander. Yes. If that invitation had never been mixed up, would you have ever walked into moonlight? He thought for half a second, long enough to be honest, short enough not to wound. I don't know, he admitted, but I know one thing. With or without it, today I'd still choose to be here. Emma pressed her lips together. She felt something fall away inside her, an old fear, a sense of not belonging she'd clung to too long. She lifted her gaze, lashes still damp, glowing under the yellow light. I only walked into your world because of a mistake, she said again, no longer a confession, but a story. I was never meant to belong. Yes, Alexander said without judgment. But that mistake brought you to me. He didn't lean in fast. He waited like a man before a locked door, listening for the inner latch to turn. Emma didn't move either, until she saw in his eyes not a stage, but a shore wanting to be her harbor. She nodded faintly. The space between them collapsed, soft enough for her to hear the faint brush of two breaths. Alexander's hand slid behind her neck, steady but tender. When his lips met hers, it was a single word written in rain and wood smoke. Here. Their first kiss wasn't thunder. It was honey dripping, slow and certain, seeping into cracks that the storm had opened. Emma responded gently, surprised at how perfectly her heart matched the rhythm. Not hurried, not desperate, just enough to know she was alive. Outside, another flash popped against the shutter, but it felt far away. The radio slipped into lazy saxophone, a long note like paint across canvas. On the counter, the no filming sign stood guard like a small knight. The wobbly chair by the door still wobbled, and always would, reminding them a crooked heart could still be beautiful. When they pulled apart, Their foreheads rested together. Alexander's voice came rougher than before. What time do you open tomorrow? 7:30. Emma smiled, fuller and calmer than all day. And I'll draw the heart crooked. Crooked all the way to the left. I'll tip triple, Alexander murmured against her lips, sealing it as a promise. So you know crooked makes me happy. Happy but still annoying, she teased. Annoying but staying, he countered. Outside, the rain thinned. Emma tugged Alexander toward the counter, setting the kettle on. Chamomile tea, she said. It gets you through the long nights better than coffee. I'll remember. Alexander sat in the wobbly chair. Tomorrow I'll handle my part. Tonight, let me watch you pour. Watching costs quadruple, Emma warned, placing 2 cups down, porcelain clinking warmly. Because watching might ruin my crooked hearts. Then I'll learn to watch without ruining, he said softly, just like I'll learn to love without scaring you. Water boiled. Chamomile rose into the air, weaving into the night. The storm outside would not end immediately, Emma knew, but a door had closed gently, a light had turned on, and a shoulder had been found. And on her lips, the sweet taste of that kiss promised enough peace to last the night. Tomorrow they would face the world, each with their role, their boundaries, and their promise. Tonight they sat across from each other, inside their moonlight, where a crooked heart had a place and a kiss had a home. Outside, the sign still read, closed. Inside, they turned toward each other. And when Emma tilted her head to kiss Alexander again, softly, it was no longer a mistake. It was a choice. In the days that followed, just as Alexander had promised, the legal and PR departments of coal industries stepped forward. The sensational headlines were gradually taken down, intrusive live-stream videos quietly disappeared from platforms, and the crowd of onlookers outside Moonlight thinned out, restoring the small street to its peaceful rhythm. Emma once again stood behind her counter, steaming milk, drawing slightly crooked latte hearts out of habit. Her regular customers smiled warmly. Miss Emma, make it lean to the left today. Thank you. This is the real taste of Moonlight. She exhaled softly, her heart finally at ease. Amid that calm, a message from Alexander appeared on her phone. Grandmother wants you to come to dinner on Saturday. 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Emma blinked, stunned for a moment. The invitation had come. For real this time. Lady Evelyn's home sat in an old stately neighborhood, its garden overflowing with jasmine and climbing roses. It wasn't the blinding luxury of society galas, but a warm glow from every wooden door and every lit window. Alexander held the door for Emma as they entered. The aroma of chicken soup drifted through the air, mingling with the smell of freshly baked bread. Good evening, ma'am, Emma said softly, bowing a little, her voice trembling. Oh dear, you're here. Lady Evelyn waited in the kitchen doorway, still wearing a striped apron. Come in, no need to be formal. I cooked plenty tonight. Just think of this as home. Emma blushed and whispered, Yes, ma'am. Dinner was served on a long wooden table, white porcelain dishes with blue trim, a floral tablecloth. Nothing extravagant, just chicken soup, toasted bread, stewed vegetables, and warm apple pie. Emma, eat, don't be shy, Lady Evelyn urged, placing a tender piece of chicken breast onto her plate. Emma quickly thanked her and took a small bite. The mild sweetness spread through her mouth, warming her from the inside. She couldn't help blurting out, This is delicious. Better than anything I've ever had in a fine restaurant. Alexander chuckled. I told you, she's the best cook in the world. If you keep flattering me, all you'll get is extra dishwashing duty, Lady Evelyn teased, laughing. Laughter bubbled around the table, filling the kitchen with a cozy glow. Emma laughed too, feeling herself melt into the comfort of it all. They shared small stories, how Alexander once skipped music lessons as a boy to play soccer, how Emma, on her cafe's opening day, had been so nervous she spilled an entire tray of cappuccinos, how Evelyn, when first learning to cook, doubled the salt and left the whole family drinking tea to recover. Each story ended in bursts of laughter. Emma felt the distance between her and Alexander's world fade, replaced by something warm and simple. As the meal wound down, Lady Evelyn set down her spoon, her eyes twinkling, though her voice remained calm. I have one question. Alexander lifted his head slightly. Emma's heart skipped. When's the wedding? Evelyn asked, direct, decisive. Silence fell over the table. Emma nearly choked, covering her mouth, cheeks scarlet. Alexander raised an eyebrow, though the corner of his lips curved, half surprised, half amused. Ma'am, Emma stammered, we only just… I know, Lady Evelyn interrupted gently, her eyes full of warmth. But the way you sit together, I can see it clearly. Don't let a small mistake make you lose something precious. You found each other. Now you must hold on. Alexander placed his hand on the table, lightly covering Emma's trembling fingers. His voice was steady, deep. Grandmother, we won't lose it. But this has to be Emma's choice. Emma looked down at their joined hands. Her heart raced with nervousness, yet overflowed with a happiness she had never known before. 6 months later, one late afternoon, golden sunlight streamed across the wooden counter as Emma wiped it clean. The familiar chime of the doorbell rang. Alexander walked in. Not in his usual sharp suit. Today he wore a simple white shirt, holding a cream-colored envelope. His steps were unhurried, his eyes steady rather than cold. What's this you've brought me? Emma teased, though her heartbeat quickened. Alexander came closer, placing the envelope on the counter, his voice warm and sure. Do you remember? Everything started with the wrong wedding invitation. Emma froze, eyes wide. Her hand trembled as she touched the envelope. Alexander, she whispered. Looking straight into her eyes, he said firmly, but this time, it's not wrong. I choose you. Emma opened it. Inside was no stranger's wedding card, but a simple invitation with words written by hand in blue ink. The one and only invitation for Emma Thompson. Please be my bride. Tears welled, blurring the letters. Emma laughed through them. You never do things the normal way, do you? Alexander smiled softly and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it, a ring gleaming in the fading light. Emma, you walked into my life through a mistake, but you made me realize that real happiness isn't in perfect plans. It's in you. Let me make mistakes with you, because this will be the right one for the rest of my life. Emma laughed through tears, nodding so hard her hair tumbled loose. Yes, I will. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger. His hand shook slightly, but his eyes had never been so certain. The cafe filled with applause from a few regulars who had happened to witness it, cheering as though celebrating a family reunion. Weeks later, the little garden behind moonlight bloomed with white and yellow flowers. Strings of lights glowed softly as dusk settled. No lavish hall, no hundreds of elite guests, just close friends, a few cafe regulars, Emma's former co-workers, Alexander's trusted associates, and of course, Lady Evelyn, sitting proudly in the front row in a pale green dress, her face radiant. An acoustic guitar played a gentle tune. Emma appeared in a simple wedding dress, hair adorned with tiny blossoms. Not extravagant, but her eyes shone so brightly that many guests grew misty-eyed. Alexander stood waiting at the end of the aisle. The man once so cold now looked tender, his gaze fixed only on her. When Emma reached him, he took her hand, gripping it as if to say, from now on, nothing can pull us apart. Their vows echoed in the garden. I, Alexander Cole, promise to love and protect you in the brightest lights and in the quietest shadows. I, Emma Thompson, promise to hold your hand in our little moonlight cafe or anywhere else. When their lips met, cheers and laughter burst across the garden, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the cafe. Lady Evelyn dabbed at her eyes and smiled softly. At last, she murmured, one mistaken invitation and one marriage made right.